Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's story, we are covering Anthony Fauci, who is a liar and a perjurer. This is a follow-up in some respects to my video from 9 months ago, where I basically called Anthony Fauci a liar. I provided receipts and documentation at that time to show he was a liar about the masks in particular at that time, where he said that we didn't need masks before Congress, and yeah, we did. So that was a lie before Congress, so that was great. And now we have new evidence of another lie before Congress by Anthony Fauci. Super wonderful. So that he's a perjurer. That, you see, you're under oath when you testify to Congress, and when you testify falsely, that's perjury. So he's a perjurer. Fun. Now, I, of course, brought receipts today because, why take my word for it? You can evaluate the evidence for yourself. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to spend quite a bit of time here. We're going to spend 7 minutes listening uninterrupted to the original presentation between Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci. We're going to listen to the entirety of his testimony. And this is important for a legal reason. Perjury has to be understood in its entire context because it is possible that something that might seem like perjury in isolation is not perjury when considered in totality of other statements, because other statements can be understood to inform the statement that might on its plain face seem like a perjurous statement. So it would be slightly error to say this statement by itself is perjury. Yeah, it's suggestive, but it's better to look at the entire context. And the entire context, I think, makes it even more evident. So we're going to listen to the entire 7 minutes. And the long and short of this testimony, Dr. Paul, Senator Paul, and Doctor, is asking Dr. Fauci whether or not NIH supports gain-of-function research, has funded gain-of-function research, or specifically in Wuhan, has funded gain-of-function research. And as Senator Paul himself is going to specify in the question, which helps to also inform the answer, because the answer is predicated on the question, Dr. Paul, Senator Paul, is defining gain-of-function as increasing the ability of a virus or a bacteria to do more things than it did before. It has a new function. It has gained a new function. Through artificial means, through man-made means, we have given it something it did not have before. All right, great. So we're going to listen to this entire exchange together so that we can all make sure we're listening like good lawyers and see whether or not you agree, based on the totality of the video, Anthony Fauci lied. So let's do that.
Dr. Fauci, we don't know whether the pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan or evolved naturally, but we should want to know. 3 million people have died from this pandemic, and that should cause us to explore all possibilities. Instead, government authorities, self-interested in continuing gain-of-function research, say there's nothing to see here. Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans. Juicing up superviruses is not new. Scientists in the U.S. have long known how to mutate animal viruses to infect humans. For years, Dr. Ralph Barrick, a virologist in the U.S., has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create superviruses. This gain-of-function research has been funded by the NIH. The collaboration between the U.S. and the Wuhan Virology Institute continues. Doctors Barrick and Shi worked together to insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the deadly SARS virus, and then use this man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. Think about that for a moment. The SARS virus had a 15% mortality. We're fighting a pandemic that has about a 1% mortality. Can you imagine if a SARS virus that's been juiced up and had viral proteins added to it, to the spike protein, if that were released accidentally? Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute
Do they fund
of
Dr.
Virology.
Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina, not
You don't think inserting
in China.
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
That is
You would
not-
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So
they
do you
write
still
about it.
support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan
Do you
Virology
support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a sub-agency and a sub-grant. Do you support that the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China. It would have been irresponsible of us if we did not investigate the bat viruses and the serology to see who might have been
Or
infected
perhaps it would be
in China.
irresponsible to send it to the Chinese government that we may not be able to trust with this knowledge and with this incredibly dangerous viruses. Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function
maintain
research
that
in
the
China.
disease
You are
arose
saying
naturally.
things that are not correct.
Government defenders of gain-of-function, such as yourself, say that COVID-19 mutations were random and not designed by man. But interestingly, the technique that Dr. Barrick developed forces mutations by serial passage through cell culture that the mutations appear to be natural. In fact, Dr. Barrick named the technique the no-see-em technique because the mutations appear naturally. Nicholas Baker in the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature. Government authorities in the U.S., including yourself, unequivocally deny that COVID-19 could have escaped a lab. But even Dr. Shi in Wuhan wasn't so sure. According to Nicholas Baker, Dr. Shi wondered, could this new virus have come from her own laboratory? She checked her records frantically and found no matches. That really took a load off my mind, she said. I had not slept for days. The director of the gain-of-function research in Wuhan couldn't sleep because she was terrified that it might be in her lab. Dr. Barrick, an advocate of gain-of-function research, admits the main problem that the Institute of Virology has is the outbreak occurred in close proximity. What are the odds? Barrick responded, could you rule out a laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not. Will you, in front of this group, categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You do support it in the U.S. We have 11 labs doing it, and you have allowed it here. We have a committee to do it, but the committee has granted every exemption. You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing super viruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States. And we should be very careful to investigate where this virus came from.
I fully agree that you should investigate where the virus came from, but again, we have not funded gain-of-function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times
You're parsing
you say
words.
it.
There
it
was
didn't happen.
research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain-of-function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain-of-function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it.
Senator Paul, your time has expired. Dr. Fauci, I will let you respond to that when we need to move on.
Excuse me?
I will allow you to respond to that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, I don't know how many times I can say it, Madam Chair. We did not fund gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Okay. So we've now listened to the entire 7-minute testimony together. So, yeah. Here's some highlights. I categorically deny that NIH has been funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan. I deny it's been fund no matter how many times they say it. He said quite a couple times in there, we deny funding gain-of-function research. Didn't seem to my mind to be particularly ambiguous. It wasn't like he was confused by the question, which sometimes happens, right? So sometimes maybe someone doesn't quite hear the question quite right, so maybe their answer seems perjurous, but they didn't quite hear the question, so that's possible. So it does, or maybe they didn't fully understand the question. That doesn't seem like what's happening. He said, I don't even know. How many times did he say, we deny gain-of-function research in that video? Half dozen? Maybe a little bit more than that? He didn't seem particularly confused. He seemed emphatic throughout the entire time with the categorical denials of we don't fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan. And with this doctor whatever, if they were doing gain-of-function by our own policy, they were doing it in North Carolina because we don't do it in Wuhan. So, yeah. Now, is gain-of-function research a good idea? I don't know. I'm not a biologist, but I assume, like many things, there's a cost-benefit trade-off. By enhancing a virus or enhancing a bacteria, presumably you can learn new things. Those new things that you learn may be helpful in fighting that virus or bacteria, or potentially in fighting other viruses and other bacteria. So as a method of gaining knowledge, it probably has some benefits. But of course, there's always the possibility that your new juiced up virus will escape the lab. And that's bad. So there's a cost-benefit analysis to be had. Is it a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? I don't know. But we did see the bad side of it this time around. Is the bad side of it worth all the good side that we accomplish? I don't know. A debate for people who have more skill in biology and virology than me. But it seems like there's at least a colorable argument either way. But it doesn't really matter whether or not you think gain-of-function research is good, or whether or not Dr. Fauci thinks gain-of-function research is good. Perhaps he does. I don't know. He's certainly more well-informed than me to have an opinion. And if he said gain-of-function research is good, we love the gain-of-function research, okay. I mean, that's a valid opinion a person could have. And because we love the gain-of-function research so very, very much, we are funding it through China because they have experience in these kinds of diseases because of their specialty in the coronavirus lab, the novel coronavirus lab that's in Wuhan. It's specifically what they do. So we funded gain-of-function research specifically for that lab. We thought it was a good idea. It got out of control. Our bad. That would be an honest opinion. That would be a truthful opinion. If he said we think it's all worth it in the end and collectively, I guess that's okay too. That might be a valid opinion. Even knowing what we know now, maybe it's all worth it. I don't know. Again, not a biologist, not a virologist. But here's the problem. He didn't say any of those things. He just said, categorically, we deny it. We did not do the thing. We don't do gain-of-function research. No matter how many ways you say it, no matter how many ways you ask the question, we don't do gain-of-function. We categorically deny the gain-of-function. We don't fund the gain-of-function. It's not true. It's not true in any way. So he isn't confused by the question. He doesn't misunderstand the question. He confronts the question for 7 minutes in various permutations of the question. And every time he's faced with the question, no matter how it's permutated, he just says, we deny it categorically, it never happened, et cetera, so forth. So I bring this to your attention because another aspect of this is there wiggle room? Is there wiggle room in the statement? Because that's also a possibility for when you're considering a perjury question, right? So maybe the answer is in some hyper-technical sense true, even if it seems perjurous or false on its statement. Maybe there's some understanding of the words that could be understood, so it would be non-perjurous. Now, ultimately, that's a fact question for a jury, whether or not it is perjurous. But I'm just saying, at least conceptually, it's possible. So the question is, how much wiggle room is there in these statements? And I'm like, there's basically none. He was confronted with multiple variations of the question. No matter how he confronted the question, he categorically denied it in every variation. He finished his statement by saying they deny it. So there's not a lot of wiggle room here. It seems very clear to my mind that he is saying very clearly, undisputably, we did not fund gain-of-function research. Okay, fine. All right, so let's go to the next part of the analysis, which is some stuff from, the Department of Health. So we're going to read this. This is a letter that was sent 2 days ago from the Department of Health and Human Services, which is okay. So it's Department of Health and Human Services is the big umbrella organization. Below that is the National Institute of Health. Below that is the National Infectious Disease Center, which Fauci runs. So Fauci isn't the Secretary for Health and Human Services. Fauci isn't the director of NIH. He's a director of a subsidiary organization, the Infectious Disease Institute, which studies that. So that's where he is in this hierarchy. But this is coming from the NIH. So this is coming basically from his boss, as it were. And here's what he has to say and share with the rest of the kids. This is to James Conner, the ranking member of the Committee on Oversight and Reform in the U.S. House. Dear Representative Conner, thank you for your continued interest in the works of the National Institute of Health. I am writing today to provide additional information and documents regarding NIH's grant to EcoHealth Alliance Incorporated. It's important to state at the outset that the published genomic data demonstrates that the bat coronavirus studied under the NIH grant to EcoHealth Alliance and sub-award to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, so that would be the part where we funded the Institute of Virology, right? So we gave a grant to EcoHealth, which gave a grant to Wuhan. So we funded Wuhan. Okay, are not and could not have become SARS-CoV-2. Okay, I don't care. Maybe that's true. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's true that the EcoHealth Alliance's funding in no way contributed to coronavirus. That might be very well true. Maybe it was something else that Wuhan or someone else did, or it's naturally occurring, which seems unlikely, but maybe it's true that their funding did no part to enhance COVID. I would simply note that wasn't the question asked to Fauci. They didn't ask, did it contribute? They asked, did you fund it? Did you fund gain-of-function research? No, we never funded gain-of-function research. So whether or not that gain-of-function research was related to the COVID-2 virus is kind of irrelevant because it's still gain-of-function research. So, yeah. The progress report was submitted to NIH in August 2021 in response to the NIH's continuing enforcement efforts. It includes data from a research project conducted during the 2018-2019 grant period using bat coronavirus genome sequences already existing in nature. So the genome they started with was natural, which, is kind of necessary when you're talking about gain of function. Of course, what you start with is natural because you're giving it new function. So, of course, yeah. The limited experiment described in the final progress report by EcoHealth Alliance was testing if spike proteins from naturally occurring bat coronaviruses circulating in China were capable of binding to the human ACE2 receptor in a mouse model. So, does the natural bat form, is it capable of infecting human beings? Okay. All other aspects of the mice, including the immune system, remain unchanged. All other aspects of the mice, including the immune system, remain unchanged, not the virus. In this limited experience, laboratory mice infected with the SHC014WIVI bat coronavirus became sicker than those infected with the WIVI bat coronavirus. So the WIVI is the naturally occurring one. And then the SHC014 would be the serial number for this particular strain of gain-of-function virus. Okay. As sometimes occurs in science, this was an unexpected result of research. Well, that's fair. Science, we don't always know what's going to happen, which is also why we should prepare for the worst when we're doing this kind of thing, as opposed to something that the research set out to do. Okay. Regardless, the viruses being studied under this grant were genetically very distant from SARS-CoV-2. Okay. I don't care. The question was, are you funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan? That was the question. Maybe it is genetically distinct. Maybe it's true that this funding was only used to fund the SHC014 gain-of-function virus. Maybe that's correct. Don't know, don't care. The question is, are you funding gain-of-function research? That's the only question I care about at this exact moment. Keep our eyes on the ball. The research plan was reviewed by NIH in advance of funding, and NIH determined that it did not fit the definition of research enhancing pathogens of pandemic potential, which I suppose is a kind of gain-of-function research. Research involving enhanced pathogens of pandemic potential. So it wasn't doing gain of research in a sphere of viruses or bacteria that have been designated as pandemic oriented. So this wasn't, for example, doing gain of function on, I don't know, take your pick, Ebola. That would be a problem, right? That might be a different set of problems. This is funding non-pandemic related research. It's still gain of function research either way. I don't care. Because these coronaviruses have not been shown to affect humans. Well, fair, but if you gave it that ability, so that, okay, fine. The bat stuff, so you're basically saying the natural bat stuff does not infect humans. That's what you're saying right now, by the way. You're saying that the natural bat stuff does not infect humans. Well, if the natural bat stuff doesn't infect humans, what's the only other alternative? That it was human created. Either nature created it or human did. There's not a lot of other options. As such, this research was not subject to departmental review under the HHS P3CO framework. Okay. It's still gain of function. I don't care. However, an abundance of caution as an additional layer of oversight, language was included in the terms and conditions of the grant award to EcoHealth that outlined criteria for a second review, such as a requirement that the grantee report immediately a 1 log increase in growth. So that's like log in terms of logarithmic scale. So it's like it's logarithmic increase. Wow, I almost can say words. Measures would prompt a secondary review to determine whether the research aims should be reevaluated or new biosafety measures should be enacted. Okay, that seems prudent. Not sure why you didn't have that in the first place. What are your safety protocols exactly? So your new safety protocol is if it grows at a logarithmic deviation more than it did before, we should reevaluate. That seems like a good policy. Why didn't you have that policy in the first place? EcoHealth failed to report this funding right away, as required by the terms of the grant. EcoHealth is being notified that they have 5 days from today to submit to NIH any and all unpublished data from the experiments and work conducted under this award. Additional compliance efforts continue. So they're trying to say that it was all done behind our back. We didn't know. Are you buying that? The second document is a genetic analysis demonstrating the naturally occurring bat coronavirus used in experiments under the NIH grant from 2014 to 2018 are decades removed from SARS-CoV-2 evolutionarily. I still continue not to care. That wasn't the question. The question was, are you funding gain of research? The question wasn't, is it possible that the gain of function research we were funding contributed to COVID. That wasn't the question. The question is, are you doing gain-of-function research in Wuhan? That was the question. So I don't care. The analysis compares the sequence relationships between SARS-CoV-1, the cause of the SARS outbreak in 2003, SARS-CoV-2, the cause of the COVID-19 pandemic, WIV1, a naturally occurring bat coronavirus used in experiments funded by NIH, RATG13, one of the closest bat coronavirus relatives to SARS-CoV-2 collected by the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and Banal 52, one of several bat coronaviruses recently identified from bats living in caves in Laos. While it might appear the similarity of RATG13 and Banal 52 bat coronaviruses to SARS-CoV-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is close because it overlaps by 96-97%, which that's not close. I mean, human beings overlap with apes by like 99% or something. Yeah. Or it's something in that order of magnitude. So yeah, it's basically like the difference between humans and like apes. So they're not, the 96% closeness is not particularly close in this scheme. Experts agree that even viruses are far too divergent to become progenitors of SARS-CoV-2. I continue not to care. Maybe all that's true. It just isn't legally relevant. The reason it's not legally relevant is because that wasn't the question. The question is, are you funding gain-of-function research? We listened to the entire 7 minutes together. For comparison, okay, yeah, so I just said it just now. Now they're going to say it. It's nice when I get there before they do. For comparison, today's human genome is 96% similar to our closest ancestor, chimpanzee. That's basically what I just said. Humans and chimpanzees are thought to have diverged approximately 6 million years ago. The analysis attached confirms the bat coronavirus studied under the EcoHealth Alliance grant could not have been the source of SARS-CoV-2 and the COVID-19 pandemic. Look at how much I care. Look at my field of caring. It is empty. My field of caring is barren and is fallow. I don't care. Look at my lack of care. If your staff has any questions, NIH would be pleased to brief you. Well, why'd you lie to us would be a great question. And then signed by Lawrence Tabak, the principal deputy director. So that's super fun. So yeah. So there is the evidence for you. We have now reviewed the evidence along with my commentary along the way, but that's fine. You have the original evidence in its totality. You have the original video in its totality. You have the original letter in its totality. So at this point, you could disagree with me because now you have all the evidence to evaluate for yourself. You have all the evidence considered. So is it perjury? Well, let's see. In order for something to be perjury, it has to be a knowingly false statement. So let's evaluate those two elements. Is it false? Yes. Yes, it is. We know it's false. They just told us it's false. They were doing gain-of-function research in COVID-19. No one can dispute this testimony is false. So that leads us to the all-important question, was it knowingly false? So this is where NIH was trying to go, I guess, is like, yeah, we didn't really realize that this was what's happening. It was one of the people we gave grants to who funded this research. And we didn't know what they were doing because they were hiding the ball from us. So at the time Dr. Fauci testified, he testified truthfully because that's what he believed to be true. Okay, so let's consider the possibilities here. There are 3 possibilities as far as I can consider it, none of which are particularly good for Fauci. Possibility number 1, he somehow didn't know, which suggests incompetence. He somehow didn't know. He's the head, reminder, he's the head of infectious diseases, right? This is a subsidiary of National Institute of Health. National Institute of Health does lots of stuff. One of their subcomponents is infectious diseases. They deal with infectious diseases. Fauci is the head of that group. He's the head of the infectious diseases. Okay. So possibility number 1, he didn't know. Okay. I suppose that's possible in some way because, it would be slightly ridiculous to suggest the CEO of a company, for example, necessarily knows everything that's going on in their company. But the problem there is he emphatically denied it. He didn't leave himself wiggle room of, it's possible, I'm not sure. He emphatically denied it. So he'd have to be pretty incompetent indeed to emphatically continue to deny it when there's a possibility. So he somehow didn't know, and it didn't come to his attention. And somehow he's also not curious. So he didn't have any desire or any thought of maybe I should look into the coronavirus thing. It started in Wuhan. Maybe it's related to the coronavirus lab in Wuhan. Maybe I should look into that and gain some information that would help inform my opinion. But no, he didn't have that thought. He never had that desire. So possibility number one is he's incompetent. He has no idea what's going on, and he literally doesn't care because he can't be bothered to think maybe I should look into it. So possibility number one is he's utterly incompetent. That's great. Possibility number two, he didn't want to know. So in this hypothetical, he didn't know at the start, maybe, or either he didn't know at some point of the exercise, whether it was initial funding or it was as the grant was going on or as the coronavirus went on through the world, right? At some point, he said to himself, maybe there's a possibility this is related to something we're doing. To himself. And then he said, I don't want to know. I want to blind myself to the truth. Now, this doesn't help him, actually, when it comes to a perjury charge, because willful blindness is knowingness, right? If you are knowingly blinding yourself to the truth so you don't learn the information, that counts. That counts. You can't say, I didn't know, because I purposefully prevented myself from knowing. I had the ability to know, I could have known, and I purposely was avoiding knowledge of that. I was my deliberate design and attempt not to learn that information so I could testify truthfully, I didn't know. Yeah, that doesn't count. That's perjury. If you willfully blind yourself, that's perjury. And then, of course, possibility number three is he did know, and that's also perjury. So basically, we're left with ultimately two options then. He perjured himself, or he's absolutely, utterly incompetent and he doesn't have any desire to learn new things. And when a major disease that's infectious is going on, even though he's the head of NIH, he can't be even bothered to consider the possibility of maybe I should look into this and whether the United States could in some way be contributing this, or curiosity of looking into where it came from. So, yeah. Now, there is a good maxim, and it's a valid maxim, of never attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. I generally believe in this maxim because people can be pretty stupid. So it is a generally good policy to believe that people are idiots rather than believe that they have moral failings. That, because people are not infinitely knowledgeable. Even smart people are not infinitely knowledgeable. So as a generally good policy, it is good to assume incompetence before malice. However, at this time, I'm inclined to go the other way. I'm inclined to go the other way because this seems to be a pattern from Fauci. We can inform our evaluation of whether this is incompetence or whether or not this is malicious, intentional, knowing. We can inform that debate by prior things, right? It's prior bad acts. So we now can look at the prior bad acts to consider whether or not there's a pattern of conduct that might inform our analysis on this discussion. And I would respectfully argue, as your wonderful host, yes, the evidence suggests that he is knowingly lying or willfully blinding himself. Take your pick. Doesn't really matter either way. He knows or he's willfully blinding. He lied to Congress about the mask thing. He lied to Congress about other things, and now he's emphatically denying to Congress that we didn't fund it. So I guess Fauci is going to go for option one. Because that's his only option. Fauci's going to go for some version of option one. And obviously they'll massage it a little bit more, and they're not going to come out and just say we're utterly incompetent and we don't care. So they're not going to quite say that. But this is their only choice, right? Fauci didn't know. That's their only option. So Fauci, they deceived us. We didn't know. We have so many grants. We had no reason to suspect them. They've been a prior good partner, blah, blah, blah. So something along those lines would be the more PR version of saying he's an incompetent person who doesn't care. So that's their only defense. But in my humble evaluation, so I'm now going to switch from lawyer to juror. Because in my humble opinion, evaluating all the facts that are presented, I conclude that factually he's a perjurer. That is my evaluation. Were these statements factual? So those are statements of fact. We know his statements. We know they're false. The only question for us as the jury to reach is whether or not they're knowing. In my evaluation, they're knowing, either through willful blindness or he did know. Take your pick. I don't care. So that's my evaluation. Now, to the next question. Does any of this matter for Fauci legally? And the answer to this question is very sadly and very disappointingly, no. Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you guys that, there is in fact no Santa Claus at the end of all this analysis. So sorry about that. But here's the problem. Traditionally, and this is a tradition, so it's not like something brand new, the Department of Justice typically doesn't investigate things that happen in Congress without Congress themselves asking. This is because Congress and the executive are both political branches, as opposed to the judiciary, which is a legal branch. The judicial branch does legal. The executive and legislative do politics. And so they typically don't look into it unless asked. And a court's certainly not going to get involved unless someone asks them. So the problem is that Congress will never vote to refer it to the Department of Justice because Congress is currently controlled by the Democrats. Now, I guess it's a bit of a salvation that the statute of limitations to bring charges is 5 years. But of course, even if the Republicans flip the House, which seems somewhat likely, the Democrats are still in control of the executive. So the House can refer the charges to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General can go, nah. And that's happened many times before, including the Attorney General evaluating themselves because of how screwed up this is. So Eric Holder, when he was the Attorney General, testified before Congress that the Fast and Furious gun scandal was not a thing. This, by the way, for those of you who forgot, is where the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was knowingly allowing people who were disqualified from buying arms to buy arms for the purpose of them being smuggled into Mexico as part of some scheme to determine gun trafficking lines, which might have been a good idea had they had any mechanism to actually track the guns. It's not like they tagged the guns with GPS or radio devices or something, or, some sort of radioactive, thing that you could detect on a scanner. No, if they had any method to track the guns, this might have been a very good operation, but they didn't. So basically, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms just let guns walk into Mexico with a plan to track them, but had no plan to track them. So that was great. And ultimately, one of those firearms was used to kill a border agent. Also super fun. So anyways, Attorney General Holder refused to provide the documents regarding this to the Congress, and Congress held him in contempt. And then Eric Holder, the Attorney General, had to decide whether or not Eric Holder, should be investigated for the perjury. How do you think that went? Yeah. Welcome to reality. So this has been a thing before with Republican administrations, Democrat administrations. This is sadly nothing new, but yes, Anthony Fauci will in fact get away with it. I'm sorry to tell you that there is no Christmas, but that's reality. There is no Christmas. The House will never vote. The House will never vote on it. And even if they did, Biden's still in charge. And by the time the Republicans could potentially take over in 3 years, I doubt that they will still care because they could bring it, but will they in 3 years, assuming that they regain control of the House and the White House? Probably not. So the more likely than not scenario is Anthony Fauci gets to continue his job. I mean, he could be fired by the president because he does work at the pleasure of the president. So he could be fired. Is he going to be fired? No. No. Biden, you think Biden's going to fire him? No. The director of NIH had the good courtesy to resign like a month or two ago. Do you think Fauci's going to resign? No. So, yeah, this, and the mainstream media will not cover this. They have not been covering it. If this was the other way around, right? If this was somehow Republican instead of Democrat, then the media would be reporting on it nonstop with the perjury. They'd have the whole tickers and everything, right? So if Trump was in office and, Fauci was a Republican and Congress, then media would be reporting on it nonstop, but they're not, because the story's been buried. So super fun. So people don't even know this happened, and people will soon forget because of other things that are happening. So yeah, there is no Christmas. There is no salvation. The public attention span has already moved on, and Dr. Fauci will not be held accountable. Super fun. So he's a perjurer, but nothing will happen. Disappointing, but that's reality. I'll take a couple of questions here at the end. Michael Onita said, but tell us how you really feel. Yep. DJ Galti says, what is the standard sentence for instances of perjury? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. It doesn't matter in a way because he's not going to be charged with it. Michael Onita says, at the very beginning, he disputes Senator Paul's definition of gain-of-function research. Is it perjury if his technically justified different definition is mine? I would say, okay, that would be a valid argument, that he had a different definition. The problem is that the question constrains the answer because he's being provided the definition. So you would never be able to get away with this in court, right? If someone asks you a question and it's open to multiple different interpretations, then obviously you having a particular interpretation or a particular definition in mind is one thing. But the problem is the question has defined the terms. Here is a definition. Senator Paul is doing what's called acting as his own lexicographer. He's providing the definition. This is the definition. And Fauci just continues to say, well, that's not right, but that doesn't matter. That's the definition. So I don't see that working because of that reason. And it wasn't like he just defined it once. He defined it once, and then he defined it in different ways. He asked the question in different ways with different definitions and different things. And no matter how he phrased it, no matter how he defined it, he got the same answer. So no. J-Boss says he also had a chance to amend the statement in front of Congress and double down. This is true. It is typically correct that witnesses have an ability to amend their statements before Congress, because sometimes someone might say something before Congress and then after the fact realize, I made a mistake here. I should correct that, right? So that's not entirely unusual. Michael Onita says he disputes Senator Paul's definition from the start. He's using his internal definition of gain-of-function research. It would have to be a justifiably reasonable definition. Yeah, that would be true, but in this particular situation, him just denying the definition I don't think works. Because they're defining the definition and the terms of the definition. So it's like, are we doing that? Yes or no? Right? I mean, the thing is, like, he could ask the question differently. It's like, are we doing this? But he says, are we doing gain-of-function research? By gain-of-function, I mean this. So he's using gain-of-function as a defined term. And so he could have asked the question, are we doing this? But he asked, are we doing gain-of-function, which is understood as this? I don't understand it to be that. Well, that's not the question. With that understanding in mind, is it true or false? So it doesn't work for me. Joe's Mad said, so if the GOP takes the House, Senate, and White House by 2024, that'll still be on statute of limitations. Well, they don't have to take the Senate. They just have to take the House. The perjury existed before the House. So this is one of those things in which the single House of Congress can act independently. Because it's not the only situations in which both houses of Congress have to act together is when they're doing legislation. So if they're not doing legislation, then they don't have to act together. And this would be one of those circumstances where what they're doing is not legislation. They're doing, he lied before our House. You're not allowed to do that. So they don't need the Senate's approval. So, but they do need the White House. So yeah, if they need the House and they need the House and they need the White House. And yeah, if they get it by 2024, that would be within the statute of limitations. So at that point, yes, he could be investigated and prosecuted. So yes, all those things. 11A, sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity doesn't work, I don't think, because he's lying before Congress, which is also, yeah, I don't think he could try sovereign immunity. It's not going to work. He could try absolute immunity. It's not going to work. He could try qualified immunity, which won't work. So I don't think anything that he can try that's going to work. And anything intentional the court can do to Fauci? No. Oh, anything international court can do to Fauci? No. The U.S. doesn't really believe in the international courts anyway. We typically ignore their judgments, and probably for the best, to be quite honest. So, no, I don't see anything an international court could do off the top of my head. I thought Rand was a senator. He's a senator. Did I say otherwise? Oh, yes, I apologize. I misspoke. I'm sorry. You're absolutely correct. The letter that we read was to a House member. That's why I got off track. I'm sorry. Yeah, the letter we read was to a House member. That's why I got off track. Let's revise that. They just need the Senate and the White House. They don't need the House. You're correct. Yeah, I got confused. It is Senator Rand Paul. So only the Senate needs to vote. You're correct. Thanks. Miss Mensa says, what do you think about vaccines? Well, in general, I think vaccines are wonderful things. They're miracles. They're miracles. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a virologist. I've tried to listen as intently as I can to a whole variety of opinions as best as I'm able with respect to the COVID-19 vaccines. So this is a bit of this is not a professional opinion, but it's as informed an opinion as I think I'm able to reach. And in my best judgment, I think the COVID-19 vaccine is effective. I think COVID is real. I think the COVID-19 vaccine is effective. It reduces your risks by about, 1 to 20 or 1 to 10, maybe at worst. So, like no vaccine is 100%. This whole idea, people say, well, it's not 100%. Show me a vaccine that's 100%. Any vaccine, I'll wait. But the fact it's not 100% doesn't make it not a vaccine. It's a vaccine. It's a vaccine with, 90% efficacy. Okay. I mean, that still qualifies as a vaccine. And 90% efficacy is a lot better than 0. So, there's that. So I've taken the COVID-19 vaccine. I recommend people take the COVID-19 vaccine. There doesn't seem to be any significant counterindications. The vaccine itself can't cause serious harm, although there is some stuff with young children and even under 18 children that is a bit concerning with some heart issues. Maya Cardona, I think it's called, something like that. So there is some evidence that suggests that there might be some risk with respect to some heart illnesses. But even with that in place, it doesn't appear to be a widespread phenomenon at this point where COVID is. So on a strict risk benefit analysis, what is my risk of getting COVID and dying from COVID versus what is my risk of getting this side effect and that hampering my life in some way? It seems on balance to still favor the vaccine, but that might not be true, particularly for very young kids. But for adults, it seems to be a largely non-problem. So that's what I think. Is Fauci too far down the ladder to be impeached? No. He could be impeached, but of course you need the House and Senate to impeach him. Do you think that's going to happen? No. You can impeach him. That'll be fine. Vaccine question. Is he lying about vaccines too? I mean, that's a very prudent question, Miss Mensa. That's an extremely prudent question. And I am not a fan of Fauci in any respect. And I think he's a goddamn liar. I think he's a damn liar. So I wouldn't believe anything that's coming out of his mouth, but I also wouldn't disbelieve it specifically because it's coming out of his mouth. That's a little insane. Even a liar can occasionally tell the truth, right? So it would be ridiculous to say, because he's a liar, everything he says is a lie. And that's a bit ridiculous. It's reason to doubt everything he says. It's a reason to question everything he says. But to reach the conclusion it's a lie in every single time, I mean, that's not a reasonable conclusion. So I think Fauci saying it's safe can be discounted. However, based on the studies that have been conducted in this country and other countries, it seems the scientific consensus favors the conclusions that I drew. So Fauci saying it does nothing for me, but there is other evidence that supports the conclusions that this vaccine is safe and effective, with a potential risk for some heart issues, particularly as you go younger in age. That does seem to be an issue. Yeah, Mark says it doesn't prevent getting COVID, but will reduce the symptoms, keeps you out of the hospital. I'm not sure that that's true. I think it might prevent you from getting COVID, but it doesn't prevent it in all cases. So yes, it's true that the COVID-19 vaccine will not necessarily prevent you from getting COVID, not necessarily reduce the symptoms, not necessarily prevent you from getting in the hospital, and not necessarily prevent you from dying, as we just saw from Colin Powell. The odds of dying with the COVID-19 vaccine in place are about 125,000 to 1. So those are pretty good odds. It didn't work out for Colin Powell. I don't know what his health history was otherwise. So maybe he had some other health conditions that were aggravating. But yeah, so those seem to be the numbers. But I believe it's true that in some cases, the vaccine will prevent you from getting COVID. I think that's true, but yeah. If you talk about symptom reduction, there's 90% efficacy. Oh yeah, the 90% number I think was specifically for hospitalizations in particular. Now, I think it was 95% for vaccines in particular. I think it's a little bit lower than that for all. I think the Pfizer is about, what are they quoting now? Like 88%, 87%, something like that. So yeah, the 95% number was for, hospitalization, which is obviously what I care about, dramatically. There's no cure for a virus. This is true. I mean, vaccines can render it out of existence, and we've done that, but there's no, I don't know if that's universally true. I don't know that antivirals won't cure viruses in some instances. So I don't know if that's universally true, but vaccines are modeled after the structure of a virus to induce the immune system to recognize and attack. Therefore, more vaccines equal more variants due to evolution. That's a possibility, but we have in fact gotten some viruses out of existence. So we have succeeded in rendering some diseases irrelevant. And the vaccine is effective enough to probably prevent mutations if widely adopted. But even if not, I mean, it's a little bit silly it's slightly silly, although it's a legitimate concern. It's slightly silly to say this vaccine will lead to mutants. Therefore, we shouldn't vaccine now. Well, the strain now is causing massive health issues. They're not on the scale of, the Spanish flu. They're not on the scale of the bubonic plague. But in my judgment, they're serious. You're talking about, 600,000 deaths in the United States or something like that? And how many deaths worldwide? I mean, the flu, excuse me, the standard flu in a typical year in the U.S. kills between 30 and 50,000 in a typical year. So at this point, COVID is 20 times more deadly than the flu? I consider that a significant risk, in my judgment. It's not as significant as the Spanish flu. It's not as significant as the bubonic plague. But, it's significant enough to care about and treat now. Maybe it will lead to variants. Yes, maybe. But that's a bit silly to not treat what seems to be a clear and present danger at this time, in my personal judgment. Lee Nielsen says, what about the thousands of nurses and scientists who come out every day? Well, I tend to look at peer-reviewed stuff. The nurses and scientists you're quoting, I don't know the degree to which their opinion is sufficiently well I don't know the degree to which their opinion is anecdotal versus particularly well studied. And the plural of it is a bit of a truism. The plural of anecdote is not data. The plural of anecdote is not data. So, yeah, nurses might have problems with it, perhaps, and they have more health knowledge than I do, so I can't contest that. I mean, they're much more well informed about biology and virology and health than I am. I mean, so sure, their opinion is more professionally well informed than my opinion. But the stuff that seems to have been reviewed, peer reviewed, doesn't appear to support that conclusion. But, they're a different voice. They're a more well-informed voice in my domain, in this domain than mine. I don't have any problems being humble when I don't know things, right? I try to admit, it's like when I know shit, I know shit. And then when I get questioned about it, I get a little bit pissy because I know it. But when I don't know stuff, I'm like, yeah, I don't know this. I don't have a degree in biology. Also, biology is not a particularly strong interest of mine. If it were physics, I'd at least be kind of interested. Biology is not a strong interest of mine. And forget chemistry. I don't understand chemistry on any level. Chemistry and I don't get along. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah. So if you want to look at those voices and consider them, then consider them. But I just, there's lots of different nurses also who go the other way. So I don't think you can just simply look at this as a numbers game. I think you have to look at it in, what are the professionals in their professional circles? What is the collective consensus of the analysis? And it's things that supports the conclusions I've drawn. Yeah, smallpox was eliminated through vaccine. Polio was basically eliminated through vaccine. There's one C in Fauci. Yeah, well, maybe there is. Someone said, as mean Canadian in all caps, but was caught by the bot. Because of the liar Fauci, we now have a world in panic over a virus with 99.97% chance of survival. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's true, but again, it is 20 times more deadly than the flu. So, I mean, I don't know what the numbers on the flu are, but it must be like 99.99% survival for the flu, and I still take the flu seriously. So, I mean, 30 to 50,000 deaths a year in the United States is, a lot, in my humble opinion. It is enough to be concerned about, in my humble opinion. We're a country of 350 million Americans, so there's that. But 30 to 50,000 deaths a year is not nothing. It's in my judgment, worthy of worrying about. 600,000 deaths from coronavirus is, in my judgment, worthy of being worried about, even if it's true. It has a 99.97% survival rate. So, plus, merely surviving, it can also lead to symptoms like long COVID and stuff like that. So, I don't think that number really gets to the conclusion you're trying to draw from it, but that's my judgment. "90% efficacy was BS. Didn't you read the actual trial?" I've read a lot of stuff on it, but maybe I didn't read that particular one. So maybe there's evidence I haven't considered. I'm telling you based on the evidence I've considered. So I'm not claiming to know all the evidence. I'm just saying based on the evidence this is not my field. If it were a field of law, right? It's a field of law, and I'm telling you, I know this shit. I understand this shit. I've considered all the things. Please stop questioning me, right? If it were that I tell you that. But in this instance, I have not read all the things, nor am I necessarily technically proficient enough to understand all the things, because it's not my field. But, I've tried my best, and based on the stuff, at least I've considered, this are the conclusions I've drawn. "We lose more people to car accidents than gun incidents we lose to COVID." Car accidents are about... No, I don't think that's true. Car accidents are 30,000 a year, I think, if memory serves correctly. And as a result, I wear a seatbelt and an airbag. Again, it's a high enough risk, in my judgment, to be concerned about. So, yeah, the automobile kills 30,000 people a year, give or take. I care. I still try to mitigate that risk. The guns, depends how you define it. The gun murders, this was true as of at least 2 years ago. It may not be true last year because the homicide rates went up. But 2 years ago, if memory serves correctly, the gun homicide rate was give or take 10,000. And then it's 35,000 when you consider all gun incidences. But I think considering all gun instances is kind of off point. I mean, yeah, so that's, my evaluation on that. But yeah. Do I support the vaccine mandates? No, I do not. No, I do not. I do not support the vaccine mandates. Except maybe, well, let me rephrase. Let me rephrase substantially. So hold on a second. Permission to revise and extend my remarks. Permission granted. Okay. I support vax mandates when they are done by state authorities. The reason for this is that the Constitution of the United States, as a legal proposition, gives all powers to the state except. So the federal government is a government of limited or enumerated powers. States have all the power that they didn't give to the federal government. So all the power is called police power. All the power is called police power. It doesn't just refer to police. It refers to the ability of the government to do stuff. So the states have police power. They have the general ability to do stuff. The federal government does not have police power. They do not have the general ability to do stuff. They only have the power to do stuff that is provided in the Constitution, which may be a lot of things, but is not all the things. When it comes to health, this is traditionally and by law a matter of state level province. If a school, for example, is mandating vaccines for its students, it's because the state authority says so. If a college is doing it, it's because the state authority says so. It's the state acting. Even if it is like the university acting unto itself. So even if, say, some university somewhere, this would be for public universities. Obviously, private universities are not members of the state and can do whatever the hell they want. But public universities are instrumentalities of the state. So when the public university does something, it's still the state doing something because they're instrumentalities of the state. So I support vax mandates when it's come out from state level authorities. This is traditionally what we have done. And also, for better or worse, this is what Jacobson talks about, a case we've discussed on this channel before. Jacobson versus Massachusetts, United States Supreme Court, I think 1905, 1910, mandated vaccines in the city of Cambridge in Massachusetts. The city of Cambridge is a state entity. It's a constituent of the state. It is the state. So Cambridge, Massachusetts mandated the vaccine for smallpox. Jacobson didn't want to do it. Now in Jacobson and Massachusetts, they did exempt for health reasons, but they didn't provide any other exemptions. But they did provide exemption for health reasons. And if you didn't do it, it was a $5 fine, which is roughly $150 today, which was the only penalty that was provided for by the regulation. Jacobson didn't want to do it, went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court, for better or worse, basically said, yes, they can mandate this vaccine. Is that the right decision? Well, maybe, maybe not. I'm skeptical of Jacobson, but it does come from this idea, at least, that the states have police power. Do they have police power to the point that they can mandate you inoculate yourself, which is actually doing something to your body? I don't know. They obviously have the power to quarantine. That authority goes as far back in time as you care to mention. They have the ability to quarantine the sick, and you can, put, any number of people who have been quarantined against their will because their virus spreading, including sometimes for the rest of their natural life. In the case of that one woman whose name escapes me, with I think smallpox, who was didn't show any symptoms, but she could still spread it, and she worked in the food service industry, and they told her stop working in the food service industry because you're infecting everyone, and she continued working in the food service industry, so they've quarantined her forever. There was that. But all that stuff comes from state level authority. When it comes to federal level authority, I'm much more skeptical. OSHA trying to promulgate this, and we'll talk about this more, by the way, when and if OSHA ever promulgates its regulations. So this will not be the last we've heard of it. We'll discuss this, obviously, way more in depth when we get that far. But OSHA is trying to promulgate the regulations based on a very broad authority, which is very broad, which basically says, in so many words, that OSHA can ensure safety in the workplace. again, it's the same fundamental problem. Like, can they make you wear a high-vis jacket? Yes. Can they make you wear PPE? Yes. Can they make you wear a hard hat? Yes. Can they make you install railings? Yes. Can they make you do this? Can they make you do that? Yes. But every regulation up to now has been about the business. Things that are of the business in the business. Can they make you do certain things when you're driving the truck for the business? Yes. Because it's the business, right? So it's part and parcel of the business, do this, do that, wear this, take this many hours of break, blah, 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 whatever, right? So OSHA has very broad authority, but the problem is OSHA's authority stops once the business stops, right? So the moment you walk out the door, proverbially, OSHA's authority ends. OSHA has no authority over me just like walking around, because I'm not in business. And for that matter, the streets are not businesses. So OSHA has no authority over the streets. So OSHA has no authority over me the moment I step outside the business. The problem with the vaccine, of course, is that it persists outside the business. So that makes it somewhat unique in this context, because they're trying to make you do something that is protecting the business, to be sure, protecting interstate commerce, to be sure, but is requiring you to do something to yourself, which creates all kinds of problems on fundamental liberty interests, creates all kinds of problems on state rights issues. So there's that. As for the Biden mandate for federal workers and federal contractors, I don't support it. Legally, as to federal employees, he appears to be on solid ground. As to the contractors, I'm less sure, but that will be a fight that will definitely persist. But that's what I think about the vaccine mandates. Peter Segal says, look like I missed the first 50 minutes of the stream. Will the topic be chopped up for VODs, or should I go back and rewatch the stream? That's a good question. I don't know the degree to which it can be chopped up, because we had to listen to the entire 7-minute video in order for me to give you the facts. I didn't want to be accused of leaving anything out, so we listened to the whole thing. But there might be VODs, but you'd probably be better off rewatching the whole thing. And then if I cut it up, watch that too. Joe's Med said, different vaccines also have slightly different efficacy to each other. I think J&J is lower. This is correct. The number I was quoting was for Pfizer specifically. But you are correct. The Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are lower, and I shouldn't have spoken universally. Thank you for the correction. Typhoid Mary was the person I was thinking of. Typhoid is a bacteria. Viruses can't survive non-symptomatically in the body. Bacteria can. I don't know that's universally true. In fact, well, it depends how you evaluate what you mean non-symptomatically, but the HIV virus can survive for quite a long time non-symptomatically. I mean, eventually it will mature in symptoms, but I don't know if it's true universally that viruses are universally non-symptomatic. I'd have to imagine that there's some viruses that that are non-symptomatic but aren't able to be killed. I don't know, but maybe. I don't know for sure. I'm trying to go through the chat in turn, by the way, and it keeps going down. The numbers are extremely overinflated and they admit the tests are junk. The tests are junk. I agree. The tests are junk. I agree. Are the numbers extremely overinflated? I disagree. The numbers might be inflated, but I don't think they're significantly overinflated, and I don't think they're overinflated to the degree that it would change the analysis. But that's my opinion. My doctor never mentioned vaccine until Delta, and then he said get the vaccine. Well, Delta changed the calculus. Delta changes the calculus. It makes the percentage of getting it higher. So one might reevaluate for that reason. That's perfectly fine. Good Logic says what? You support state mandates requiring you to inject in your body. I was speaking from a legal proposition as I was going through the legal analysis. So my entire argument was legal. It was never moral. So when I said I support them, and then I went through a legal analysis. not a moral analysis. I didn't state whether I support them on a moral level. I said I support them on a legal level. Here's why. Here's the legal analysis. Here's what states can do. Here's what the Supreme Court said in Jacobson. Here's why that doesn't necessarily apply to the federal government. Here's what OSHA's trying to do. Here's why that might not work. Here's what Biden's trying to do. Here's why it will work, right? So when I say something like I support or oppose, it's usually a legal opinion. And I present it as a legal analysis, not a moral analysis. Miss Mensa says, any advice for not being scared of the second dose side effects? My side effects were very mild. I had about a day of chills. I think it's, that's my opinion. It's worth it. So a child of the age says, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right or they should be supported. Fair enough. I wasn't arguing whether it's right or wrong. I'm not making a legal judgment. And that's the state of the law at the moment. So that's the legal analysis. Child of the age, Good Logic wants to send him a link so he can debate your mandates. Okay, I'll do that. Sure. How are variants determined? By symptoms, there's no variant test. I think genetically. I believe that there's that the virus has been looked at genetically. So they are able to determine it that way. I believe is correct. Good Logic says, send me a link. Okay. I don't know how I'm going to do that on every possible level. But sure, let's get Good Logic in here. Okay, hold on. Okay, give me a second. This is going to be interesting. Talk amongst yourselves while I set this up. Okay. Create broadcast, new broadcast. Skip that. Do this. Create broadcast. Do I have an? I'll direct you on Twitter, I guess. Send to you on Twitter. Invite. Copy. Continue talking amongst yourselves. Let's see. There he is. Follow that. Message him. Send him a link. Send link. Great. All right. So now we're doing that. Fantastic. Now I need to pop this out into a new window. And then we're going to have to do this the hard way, which will be entertaining on every level. While I'm waiting for him, I'll continue answering your questions. Where was I? Yeah. It's worth noting that Jacobson claimed a medical reason, but wasn't able to prove it. Fair. There are 4 branches of government with the CDC as the highest branch, and it's cute. Oh, there he is. Okay, hold on. So now this is going to take a second for me to set this up. Hold on. I have to change windows. This will take a second. Let's see. Oh. Okay. All right. I need to create a new window, I think.
You're good. You're good. We're good.
Yeah, yes, we are in Streamlabs, but I'm not streaming in the first place in Streamlabs, so I have to add the Streamlabs window to OBS.
That's
so
impressive.
That takes a second.
I wouldn't be able to do that. That's impressive.
I can do it. It just takes a second. Talk amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst yourselves. This is gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. This is the conversation that should have been had like a year ago. We should have been having this conversation.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm happy to have it now. I'm happy that you're here, and always happy to talk to you.
I really appreciate you giving me a chance to come in here.
No problem. That didn't work. Hold on. That worked. That's the one. Yay! Now I got you on screen. Now I just need to readjust the window so it looks correct.
Don't worry about that. I'm on my phone in my car, so.
Hey, I'm a professional, man.
I see.
Okay, you probably don't need to see me twice, so I can remove that, and then I can do this. And
I want to see you in stereo.
Oh, I'm thrilled.
In visual stereo. That way, it looks like three-dimensional.
Okay, we finally got it set up. How are you doing, Good Logic?
I am awesome. How are you today, Kurt?
I'm having a fantastic day, as always. I mean, well, not as always, because I suffer from some depression, but I'm having a good day today.
I'm sorry. I hope Prozac is that?
I'm on several meds for it, but yes.
All right. Well, you have no reason to be depressed. You're living the dream, which is you have,
depression doesn't need a reason. You know that.
I guess so. Okay. Can we talk? Okay. So I understand you don't want to talk to morality. I understood that you were talking from the legal precedents and relying on Jacobson to say that justifies the mandates that we're looking at today. And I concur with you that if any government entity is going to be issuing mandates, it makes a lot more sense under our Constitution to say that it's coming from a state government rather than federal government. That being said, I do not believe that the state government has the authority under Jacobson to issue mandates, and here's why. Jacobson had considerable distinctions that the court made a really big deal about that being relevant to their final determination. Those distinctions were the $5 out, which in today's modern money on the account, if you adjust for inflation, is $130. That's very different from saying you also were dealing with a vaccine that was not nearly as brand new as the current vaccine, and it had been tested for a lot longer. Now, obviously, the testing they could do 120 years ago or 115 years ago when Jacobson came out is not as effective potentially as what we have today. Still, when you consider the fact that they're focusing on the fact that you have an out, and now we have these mandates like de Blasio saying you cannot work, you cannot have any form of income. You can't go into restaurants, you can't go into bars, they're going to make it you can't go into supermarkets. You literally cannot live without getting a mandate, without getting a vaccine under these mandates. That has nothing to do with Jacobson anymore. Because Jacobson specifically relied on the fact that you could opt out of it for a relatively measly $130, and you don't have here. This is costing your entire freedom. You're basically a prisoner in your home. You have no way of going anywhere. You have no liberties at all. If and I'll make one more point. It was a 30% death rate they were dealing with in the vaccine.
Sure, that's a very valid point. Yes.
And as opposed to whatever the rates are today, and the numbers, depends on which study you look at as far as the impact and the comorbidities and obesity and all these other factors that weigh in, as well as the age of the victim, of someone who's infected with COVID. It's certainly not as bad as Spanish flu. It's not even close.
No, it's not even close. It's be ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not even comparable. It's like having a conversation, about, it's literally about, it's the difference between a guillotine and a 1-year prison sentence is the difference between,
something like that. Yeah.
It's that dramatic. It's really, really different. So to rely on Jacobson and say, oh, because of this case, so now anytime there's any illness anywhere in the world, that now the government has a right to lock down everything, to mandate that you inject yourself with a vaccine which has very limited testing period. I think that's taking Jacobson to such an absurd extreme that I don't think it's giving a fair legal support. Forget the morality of it. Purely just relying on Jacobson to say, now that we have that, I mean, think about this, Kurt. Think about this for a second. If there was an illness out there that literally would kill 1 in a billion people, and they say, okay, we're creating a vaccine for this, and now everybody has to take this vaccine, that's the same in effect. Under if you're using Jacobson to say in that scenario, yeah, we can force you that you have to take this experimental drug that we just came out with 10 minutes ago. Otherwise, you're confined to your house for the rest of your life. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That's an illogical extrapolation of Jacobson to my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you in part. While the Supreme Court obviously mentioned the fine of $5, I don't agree that Jacobson was predicated on that, or that it was a major part of the decision. It was mentioned, but that doesn't seem to be correct. I was trying to speed read through Jacobson as well, trying to see what it had to say. But there's this quote here from Jacobson. I'll just quote: "The police power of a state embraces such reasonable regulations." Which what reasonable means, but we can debate that, related to matters completely within its territory and not affecting people of other states, established directly by legislative enactment as will protect public health and safety. And then a little bit further down, it says it's within the police power of a state to enact a compulsory vaccination law, and it is for the legislature and not the courts to determine, in the first instance, whether vaccination is or is not the best mode of prevention of smallpox and the protection of public health. So I agree with you in part and disagree with you in part. There are obviously major factual differences, and your extreme example is a valid point of like, how far can this go? Can it really go to the extent that, because if you take Jacobson and you say, okay, they can mandate any vaccine and state power can do anything, basically, then a reasonable extrapolation from that would be, yes, 1 in a billion disease and forcible mandate and staying home forever, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. There is that idea of reasonable, so I guess we could quibble on that, whether or not that's reasonable, which probably is not. But even if that didn't have that reasonable carve-out, you could still say, look, this is just an absurd conclusion. It can't go that far. So then you would be saying, okay, it can't go that far here. Because as you rightly point out, smallpox was like a 30% killer, and this is distinctly not. This is a killer in, maybe 0.05% of time, or something of all the cases. I think it is serious enough.
Those who have comorbidities is much higher. It's much
yes.
higher for them. So it's kind of ridiculous to compare a healthy 20-year-old, person to an overweight 80-year-old. It's insane to compare, what should be in effect for what restrictions we should put on these people, and that's part of the problem, I think, with it. But I'm sorry.
And the nature of the restrictions also too, because it's a $5 fine, which, as you say, is $130, or based on my math was $150, but was $20 between friends. That's a pretty low fine. It's like if the only thing I had to do is pay $150, then we're done. It's like, okay, great. And now instead they want to, as you point out, the penalties have gone up substantially. You're not able to work. You're not able to earn a livelihood. You have to stay at home, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So you can distinguish this. You can distinguish it factually based on the mortality rate. You can distinguish it factually on the penalty. There's grounds to distinguish. Jacobson appears to allow for that, but I've had skepticism of Jacobson and expressed that before because of the problems that it presents when it comes to bodily autonomy. Quarantining is one thing, masks are one thing, but when you're talking about making me do something to myself, it's like, how is that also incidentally compatible with Roe versus Wade? I thought medical issues were an issue of privacy between me and my doctor, and no one else can intervene. Isn't that sort of a logical conclusion from Roe? What happened to that? So there's all those things. So there's ground to distinguish, and if you tried to sue over it, who knows what the U.S. Supreme Court would eventually do. But yeah, Joe's points are quite valid. The Court of Appeals would almost certainly uphold it using Jacobson, because the Court of Appeals are lazy. But what the Supreme Court would do, who knows?
Right. And I'm unaware as to why it is that's taking so long for these issues to get to the Supreme Court. I mean, I know that in the legal world, everything takes forever, but still, this has become such a matter of urgency. We saw when it came to the religious mandates, like with the Archbishop and Aguda sued Cuomo, that got before the Supreme Court in a matter of weeks. And these mandates, maybe it's in part because of the fact that this OSHA thing has not been written. There's been no executive order that's been issued. It's pretty much been a press release, which was a very sneaky way of the federal government to sort of get people to do it without having it be legally challengeable, because, now
mandate by press release. That's the first.
All these employees are doing an expectation of an EO that could, in theory, never come. So, and I do want to talk with you about the whole OSHA thing and compare it with you, and this is a legal discussion more than a debate, as far as the power of OSHA to implement such a thing and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'm skeptical, because pretty much all of OSHA, everything they do is in of or concerning the workplace. You're in the building, you're in the company truck, you're in the whatever, you're in this company capacity. Wear the PPE, wear the mask, wear the hard hat, install the rail, blah blah blah. Right. The problem with the vaccine mandate is, by taking the vaccine, it impacts me when OSHA no longer has authority over me. Because once I leave the workplace, OSHA's authority stops. OSHA has no authority over me anymore once I go out into the world. But now they want me to do something to myself that impacts me as I go out and about the world. I'm not sure their authority to protect business, as broad as it is, necessarily can go that far.
Well, I want to ask you if you think that we can analogize the Supreme Court slamming the concept that there could be an EO, which would give the CDC power to have a moratorium on rents, and say that that's not good. You need to have legislation to pass that. That similarly, that we can look at this as being another federal bureaucracy agency thing, and that you can't just have an EO to affect an order like this, but that the court may come along the same lines and say, if you want to have such a broad sweeping impact on society, that's got to be legislative. That's not, if it's going to stand, then an EO would not be sufficient. What are your thoughts about that comparison?
It's a harder argument. It's a harder argument. In the CDC case, they had a whole list of enumerated things. You, CDC, can protect the world. You can protect the world through these particular mechanisms, screening for viruses, destroying soiled articles, fumigating places, blah, 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 and the other stuff. And, the other stuff can't encompass the rent. It makes no logical sense in that sense. So, no. It's a little bit harder to make that argument, but it's possible, because OSHA's authority is much more broadly written. It is much more written as OSHA can do all the things, but even then, they can do all the things as it relates to businesses.
Workplace.
And so even then you can be like, well, this is not merely the workplace, so you can distinguish on that grounds. And then you make the other arguments, like, even if somehow it's within the scope of that. So there's a couple arguments. Once it's not within the scope of that, even if it somehow could be understood in the scope with that, it's not an OSHA role, because that would belong to presumably the CDC or the Department of Health. This isn't really a concern for this group, OSHA, in this way. And even if it could be understood as not in conflict, it's impacting me in a way that violates fundamental bodily autonomy and liberty outside the workplace. So there's that. So I think OSHA's authority, as broadly as it's written, there's problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's my analysis. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure if the fact that it's impacting the employee when he leaves the workplace is necessarily going to be something that is going to help those who are fighting against these mandates. Because we could, assuming, if we start with a premise, which I don't accept, but those who start with a premise that it's somehow helpful to society beyond John, if we force John to get vaccinated, that's going to help Jane and Mary. So in that case, if we start with that, that's part of protecting him. Just because it's having an impact on him when he leaves the office, that doesn't mean that there's not a requirement to make sure that we're doing all we can to protect Jane and Mary when they're in the workplace. And that's, I don't think that's a reason to reject saying that we're going to require just because it's having an impact on him afterwards. I mean, think about it like this. You're saying that you could require them to wear a mask. Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's say wearing a mask now, 5 minutes. Think about this for a second. Now when you wear a mask, so for 3 minutes after you leave when you're wearing a mask, you're going to have like marks on your face. So in theory, I'm talking just this is all theoretical. You can argue, well, why do I have to deal with having that line on my face for the 3 minutes I walk out after the office? And the point out of the office, you're having an impact on me now, even after I've left the office. So my point is, if you're going to draw that conclusion that you can't have an impact on people when they're leaving the office, that would, I think, restrict OSHA's ability. I mean, I gave a bad example, but we could think of other examples where that's a terrible example. It's an awful example. It was the worst example imaginable. But the point is, we can probably come up with different things which OSHA, we would all relatively agree, it's okay for OSHA to do this, even though it'll have an impact for you in a, some sort of minimum way after, when you walk out of OSHA, when you walk out of your office. So, I don't see that that's going to be helpful. It's also not like when you're walking out of the office, you have to get another shot. It's if you want to walk into the office, you have to get jabbed. If you want to walk in there, the fact that it's having an impact on you afterwards, I don't know. To me, I don't know if I'm expressing it well, but to me, I don't see that that's going to have much help for those who are fighting against these mandates. But
well, if that's true, then we're screwed. If that argument won't work, I'm not sure what I got left.
I'll tell you this much. I think that OSHA only gets this power. I don't think that first of all, I do question the federal government's ability to pass this law on a private business. Even, if a private business, if you're going to argue that a private business, which has over 100 employees, which is obviously on some level is dealing interstate, and this is, I think, part of the problem of us.
Yeah, well, if we want to have that argument, we could go all the way back to Wickard and have that discussion, because I hate Wickard with a burning passion. But because
really now with the global village we have, everything is interstate. Yeah. Every single thing it's impossible. No one has anything aside from maybe home ownership, which even that you're borrowing money, and the money you're borrowing is coming interstate from this bank or that bank. The
lumber you used, the shingles or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And even if somehow it wasn't, even if somehow everything is coming intrastate, back to Wickard, because you are not buying things in the interstate commerce market, that has an effect on interstate commerce too. So your non-commerce, non-interstate is interstate commerce. Yay.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's where the courts went wrong when they gave such broad latitude to the federal government.
You don't have to convince me. You don't have to convince me. I hate the case with burning passion.
Right. So, yeah, no, that's pretty much what I had for you. I don't want to take up your entire stream. You weren't planning on doing a duo.
Yeah, that's all right. I was in Q&A portion anyway. I probably would have ended at some point anyway, so it doesn't bother. If you had asked me in the middle of my ranting part, I would have been less inclined. But when we're in Q&A, sure, why not bring in other people? It's fun. I like talking to you, and I want people to hear different perspectives, and good logic raises some very valid legal points. It's like, there's some problems here because this was only a $5 fine. It was for a virus that was for 30 killed 30% of the people. And this is distinctly not that. And by the logic of it, it would go to the billion, which I can't deny. So that is an absurd result, which I can't deny. So maybe we should question the result here, which I also can't deny. But that's that's an issue for the Supreme Court, I guess. But broadly speaking, I support maybe I should have said I broadly support vaccine mandates from states, because broadly speaking, the vaccine mandates up till right now, the vaccines have been relatively well established, and maybe I should have said that.
Well, that's the other thing. And I do want to tell all your viewers, you definitely neither of us are giving medical advice. We don't know anything about medicine at all.
No, I think I made that clear.
Consult your doctors about how to best take care of yourself. I certainly wouldn't, God forbid, I would lose tons of sleep. I ever thought someone listened to me and then decided how they were going to act on a medical basis, and that they got impacted by that in a negative way. That would really crush me. So please talk to your doctor. Find out what's best for you and for your loved ones to make sure that they stay safe, and that we should all get through this in perfect health. So I thank you for the time. Walk carefully, because when I first walked on here, when I first turned on your stream, I was like, this guy's he's gonna get a strike. He's getting a strike is coming. And so I'm urging you, just be careful. I know that look, I know you're not giving any misinformation, but my yardstick is nowhere near what you
it's hard to give misinformation when I literally played the entire 7-minute portion of it. I played the entire thing, all of it.
You can play anything, and
then I read the letter in its totality, all of it. I gave all the facts.
I'm telling you, I won't raise this topic on my own channel. I only do it. I do it on locals. I won't do it on my channel, because it's like, who needs the headache? It's a sad world we live in, but that's just the reality. You got to dance in tune with what the powers that be dictate. So
you're saying that is both true and saddening.
Yeah.
But it's like I probably knew that, but I routinely forget that because I want
saying
to
it out
I
loud,
want
brother.
I want to say things, and then I want you to be, and then I want to here's a nice concept. Then you, for example, someone or you or someone like you can come on my channel and have a respectful dialogue. I think
Yeah.
maybe you didn't quite consider this. You haven't quite reasoned through that. Oh, please tell me more things so that I can look at this from a different perspective. And then we have a dialogue, and I'm like, yep, Joe is right, and Joe's analysis makes sense. It's valid, and yep, I'm well informed. See how well dialogue works? It's great.
Yeah. This was great. I really appreciate you letting me on, brother.
No problem. Anytime, I'll let you go.
Have a great day.
All right, bye. Fun times had by all. He's fun. Yeah, it's like how unreasonable YouTube is. It's like I literally played the entire 7-minute hearing. I played the entire exchange, all of it. I want you to hear all of it. I read the letter, all of it. I want you to see and read all. I put it up on screen as I was reading it, so you could read it for yourself, just in case I misspoke, right? I put the original video on screen. I put the text I was reading on screen so you could read it too, just in case, so you know it's there. In case I misspeak something, you know what the original is. Like there's a reason I do these things. I try to give you the facts. And then I'm like, here's the conclusions that we can draw based on those facts, and here's my analysis of it, and here's why I'm reaching those conclusions. But yes, you are all correct. YouTube is, in fact, unreasonable, and my entire analysis I just said just now is kind of irrelevant, and that's sad. It's irrelevant and sad. I'm sad. Yeah. Okay, well, before the channel gets struck, I guess, are we going to get another cookie with Uncivil? We might. If you're enjoying this stream, might I suggest that you like it, and also may I suggest you put a comment. Maybe if more people put more comments in, it will boost the streams, and more likes will help boost the stream and not get buried in the algorithm. I don't know, but I'm willing to take the chance that it will help somehow. So please do those things so other people might see this. If you're not already a subscriber, why not? You can just hit the subscribe button. It's fun. It's fun and easy. Just hit the subscribe button and you'll be subscribed. And did you know for a mere 99 cents, you too can become an uncivilian? It's true. If you hit the join button or the link that Streamlabs periodically has been telling you about, you too will be able to become an uncivilian. For 99 cents, a 99-cent benefit means you get the cool little icon by your name to show your membership, and also I like you better. So I guess I'll upload this entire video to locals as well, just in case. So there's that. So yay. Until later, my friends, I hope all's well. Cheers and goodbye.